Hi, and welcome to the new and improved Get Soul Strong virtual classroom. I am your host, Rabbi David Katz. Good to have y'all back. We're here for a good couple of months, and then I'm on a plane to Cape Town. So, God willing, we should have 2 months uninterrupted. There will definitely be classes on Tuesday nights, because that's the night I agreed not to take the car. Monday nights, maybe, depending on the scheduling. And then for sure, either a Wednesday or Thursday. So we're looking at 2 to 3 classes a week. Definitely Tuesday. Definitely one other day to be announced at the right time. So stay tuned on I Get Ger for updates, or Jacques will update you, or whatever we need to do. Also on the website, you'll see a status bar on top, and there we can post class times and announcements as well. This is the new class of the new season. Not too keen right now to always stick to the schedule, even though I know we have a schedule. When topical things come up, I do like to deal with those topical things. So today's topic, this is a proper Ger class. Everyone type 1 for Ger class, because it's always fun to have Ger class. And I think by now, you know what to expect with Ger class. Yay, Ger class, type 1 Ger class. Today's Ger class has to do, how do I want to say this? With the beginnings of Ger, and the disgruntled opinions that some people have with Ger. And I want to read you one of the most current, up-to-date criticisms that I've received. And it's not like it's a new criticism. There's all these criticisms. We're always trying to boil down the criticisms to one fundamental criticism, because it seems that the Noahide / conversion rabbi camp, which is the only critics out there, nobody else has an issue, at least that have presented it to me, outside of general paranoia of dealing with non-Jews, that maybe somehow you guys are a bunch of missionaries tricking me into the church. That's what the paranoid will have you believe. But outside of that, the only opposition comes from those who have vested interest in the market, so to speak, the Noahide rabbis and the conversion rabbis. Noahide because there's no such thing. Conversion because the plan is make Noahide so bad, otherwise you can convert, and Ger offers an alternative, and it's an authentic alternative. It shouldn't even be an alternative. It's what the Torah says to do. That eliminates Noahide and conversion, and there's not just one kind of Ger. There's many billions of paths of Ger. Each one is unique. Every person's unique. God is merciful and great and has the Ger in mind and loves the Ger, type 1, because that's how it is. And we've spoken about this a million times in a million ways. And again, the same disgruntled feedback comes back to us that y'all are just confusing. Katz is confusing. Have you guys ever heard that before? Well, Katz, he's just confusing. Well, he confuses the sources. Then they say it might be because I'm unlearned. Then they say I just misunderstood. Some say I'm just actually deceptive and I'm deceiving people purposely. But then once I entertain these notions, and if these are all comments that can come from one person. For example, our good friend, bless his heart, Moshe Shulman, bless his heart, he writes a blog that I really like. I'll go on record as saying that. I'll post a link here. Because the more these guys avoid us, me, whoever, they generate that spark of understanding of what their problem is. They begin to articulate it. And thank God Moshe started writing this blog, which I like. I'm not responding to it because it's ridiculous. So then why do I like it? because he's telling you openly, articulately what his personal problem is, and he's echoing what the Noahide problems are. And the more that they play this game, the more they articulate and tell you what it is. But they won't tell you personally. They're not going to call you and talk to you like a human. They're going to talk behind your back and lashon hara and write little blogs, anything but confronting the truth. So I read the blog when it comes out. And again, in this blog, in this post, the first post you can see, he'll oscillate between I'm deceptive, misunderstanding, and I'm confused, and I'm confusing. Have these terms or concepts been made clear to you guys? One or two? Or is this new, what I'm telling you, or is this the same old tune that we've all heard? Yeah, Jock, same old tune? Anyone? Same tune. And again, I like it because the more they articulate, the more I get to really understand. My only question is, why are they fighting us? It's okay to disagree and go about your business, right? You know what? I don't agree with you. Okay, I don't agree with you, but that's fine. But it's not the disagreement. It's that they can't allow coexistence. Now I can tell you how they learned this and that wrong, and maybe I do explain that. But I'm not saying that all Noahide organizations have to shut down and we have to stop them at all cost and make banners of "Stop the Noahides, they're deceiving you." That's not my problem. My problem is to make it clear when they attack what I say and they bring their fake sources, that I expose and explain why their fake sources are the way they are. But let's not be fooled. They start the game by attacking Ger existence. And then that makes me wonder, what is the attack? What is that? Like, how does it work? Why? On a very technical level, it's baffling to me. It's mind-boggling why they can't just leave it alone. So today I thought about it a lot, and I wrote some notes to myself. They're saying that because these poor Gentiles can't learn, and they're being deceived by Ger teachings. Remember, there's not just deceiving. They also say they're being confused by Ger teachings. There are a lot of fill in the blank with the Ger teachings. Then you say, but Katz has support from rabbis that are Talmidei Chachamim and know how to learn. In fact, Justin Becker, haven't you seen some of those rabbis in person? Jacques, haven't you seen some of those rabbis in person? For example, Hendler, right? John, you weren't there, but in Chicago, Justin Becker actually sat with Moshe Soloveitchik and myself, right? He sat there, and what Justin heard would blow your mind of what Rabbi Moshe Soloveitchik actually thinks about certain things. Justin, is that a 1 or 2? Is that a 1 or 2? That's a big one. And it's shocking. So then they say, well, if I have backing, then what's the problem? Oh, but Moshe Soloveitchik was fooled by Katz. He was deceived by Katz. Justin Becker, did I ask Moshe Soloveitchik to support Russell Kirk's I Get Ger Facebook page and say, Moshe Soloveitchik gets Ger? And then with a cute little meme. Did we talk about that at all, Justin Becker? Or did we stick to the book and the work of the book, which had nothing to do with me, but that which was copied and pasted into the book? Would you agree with that assessment, since you were there sitting with one of the 2 biggest supporters of the laws of Ger Tosha, Moshe Soloveitchik? Okay, Justin confirms. So then it becomes, we have to stop Rabbi Katz. And then Rabbi Katz says, I don't stop because that's not what I do. Then it becomes a fight to stop the Ger, and the bad learning never really gets discussed. It's only they have to stop Ger, and then we don't stop, and we want them to stop trying to stop us. Then you get this bickering back and forth where they're confusing, deceiving, and misunderstanding, right? And again, the more this little dynamic plays out, I like to analyze what they write because it allows me to understand the psychology of their fight. And Moshe Shulman is the newest leader of their pack. And I enjoy reading what he writes. I don't agree with a good portion of it, but I do enjoy it. I really enjoy printing it out and laying on my couch in my office and pondering what he has to say about his critique and what he's been coming out with recently. And I don't think the Shulman matters in the big picture. Don't get me wrong, but anybody can articulate anything. And if someone is going to articulate, if someone is watching the Facebook shenanigans on the side and they have something articulate to say to me, I'm going to listen. And I will say that he is articulate in his vocalizing and making a synopsis of what he views as problems, one or two. And I stress they're not real problems. They're what he views as problems. Because anybody can make problems. I've learned that by living in Israel. Problems are made up. Generally, problems are made up, and then the governments and bureaucratic systems want you to deal with made-up problems. For example, in high school, you know what they say if you don't bring a number 2 pencil for your Scantron test, Justin? Well, that's a problem, David. And I say, why is it a problem that I don't have a number 2 pencil? Because it won't work. The Scantron can't read anything. It's not a number 2. But once upon a time, I took a Scantron test that wasn't number 2, and it worked. And if you argue, well, Mr. Johnson, I have a number 1 pencil, and it works just fine, they will promptly say, David, go to the principal's office because you are insubordinate, type 1. And I would go to the principal's office and say, well, Mr. Schroeder, I rebelled and I brought my number 1 pencil. And he would say, well, David, then you know what that means. And I would say, yes. Does that mean I have to get another after-school detention? Yes, David. We can't be arguing with our teachers. You're right. You're absolutely right. We can't be arguing with our social studies teachers in the 10th grade. That would be wrong. And this little song and dance was what I called high school in Centerville High School. And we're still apparently in high school because we're dealing with number 2 pencil problems and Scantron test scores when we should be talking about Metatron and something other than pencils, type 1. I don't know, it just seemed to fit. So with that being said, let's read one of our made-up problems to show you what the problem is. And I believe this is a great example of the problem, okay? In fact, he even addresses the problem I have with cats. Here is like this. You guys with me? 1 or 2? 1 or 2. This is hot off the press. This is the problem. Are you guys interested in hearing the problem? 1 or 2? Do you want to hear the problem with Ger? This is the problem. All right. If he would say that Ger Stam, meaning whenever a rabbinic source says Ger, if I would say, oh yeah, Ger Stam means Ger Tzedek, a non-Jew, and I would translate that for you. I would give you the Iker, a non-Jew who converts. Only a Ger Tzedek isn't always a non-Jew who converts. And that's why I don't teach it that way. An Eved Kanani of Amos 48b is called a Ger Tzedek. Okay. And then I would say, in a Ger Toshav doesn't exist today, period. In the Tanakh, I would say, Ger can mean various things. And we need to see what Rashi and the commentaries say it means in each case. What I mean by Ger is something different from them, and not to contradict them, but a parallel meaning of X. Like Chassid and Tzaddik has a parallel meaning to Chassidim. Then he signs off, but that is not what he says, and that is not what his people think he is saying. Well, I'm glad Moshe Shulman is a spokesman for me and my people, so to speak. And I will just say this. The great Ger himself, Russell Kirk, commented on this thread. We say what the Torah says it is. Type 1. Type 1. When people speak in common vernacular, we need not oscillate into rabbinic halachic definitions. And it is difficult to understand when somebody is speaking, let's say, in common vernacular or in halachic vernacular. And you could call that the daily struggles of communication. And by the nature of mankind, we struggle to communicate effectively. Did you guys know that? Especially between men and women. We really struggle to understand our fellow human beings. And therefore, when people are eavesdropping or listening in to something they're not following, all the more so is it easy to misunderstand, take something out of context, etc., etc. So what we do is we write a book called The Laws of Ger Toshav, where it is explicitly written everything that I teach that matters in terms of the controversial Ger message. Would you agree with that statement? 1 or 2? 1 or 2? 2, 1, 1, 2, 2, 1, 1. Hello. 2, 1, 1, 1, 2. Hello. 1, 1, 2. Yeah. Then our good friend over at Torah's B'nai Noach blog points out that in Laws of Ger Toshav, he has a difficult time understanding my definitions of Nachri. In fact, let me get that printout I have over there. So as you know in my book, I have about 2 different glossaries of definitions, type 1. And if you look on, let me point this out for you, for those that don't know. In Laws of Ger Toshav, I have several places where I define Nachri. And the good fellow says he can't understand why the definitions seem to be contradicting, which reminds him of the contradictions of the New Testament. Because the New Testament has a lot of contradictions. So his Christian radar goes off saying, this isn't one of those Christian books, is it? Well, no, Moshe, it's not. So now in my book, Laws of Ger Toshav, to explain why there are different conflicting definitions, I urge the reader to turn to page 119. And where it says appendix, you'll see the number 73. And that is a footnote. And I'll read you the footnote. By the way, the appendix is the launch of the Ger FAQ and elucidation of terms and lexicon of terms, which is where he was quoting from in his retort. The repetition in terms is for the purpose of clarity and reiteration. Many of the terms carry multiple connotations and change through context. The subtle nuances of many of the key terms mandate reiteration for the sake of clarity and comprehension. Did you understand that? Do you guys understand what I just wrote, what I just read to you? 1, 2, 2, 1, 1, 1. Hello, hello, hello. Hello, 1, 1, 2, hello. All right. So now we'll point out some things here. So I like to answer what they say because it's just interesting to me that people don't get it. So on 144 in Laws of Ger Toshav, we learn of a Nachri Chosid, says he, who appears similar to a Ger Toshav, which he continues to spell Toshav wrong. He says the language is hard to comprehend there. What do I say on page 144? Nachri Chosid, an elevated Gentile viewed with a good eye because of his love of Israel. Or it can be seen a lesser term of endearment for any one of the various Ger Toshav labels that falls short of Ger Toshav Gamor, or any subcategory of a righteous Gentile Ger Toshav Chassid Olam. He says it seems to be based on something that appears in Od Yisrael Yosef Benichai. How about absolutely it is based on Od Yisrael Yosef Benichai, taken from the base Yosef in Yeridea, who calls this a Nachri Chassid. Now, I find it interesting that our antagonist here gets it wrong, which means he didn't read it inside, and he calls it a Chassid Nachri. And it's not a Chassid Nachri. It's called either a Goy Chassid or a Nachri Chassid. And then and because he is from the Chassidi Amosa Olam, he says this Nachri is clearly not an Akum. Our good friend, the antagonist, thinks that the use of Akum means literal idolater, type 1. Actually, type 2, because it's not. Sometimes Chazal use Akum to mean a literal worshiper of stars. Other times it is a synonym of Goy and Nachri. And through context, you can tell. We see that he says on page 149, I say something different again, because the Nachri is not a Nachri Chassid. I say a non-Jew, by standing as a non-Israel ideologically, this term is synonymous with Akum Goy, non-Jew, and sometimes Kuti. Nachri is a biblical term, while the others are Talmudic synonyms. That seems pretty clear to me. Type 1 or 2, up to you. Okay. Then he offers his definition in Talmud Brachas 47b, that a Nachri is anybody not converted. Okay. He found another Iker term of Nachri. Very good. Does it mean something radically different than what I brought? No. Can you go through the entire Shas and point out every definition of Nachri used in context as an Iker term for the sake of hearing yourself talk? Yeah. Does it change the definition? No. Okay. And I guess that's all he has to say about that. Which there's other problems that he has. But, wait, I missed a couple here. Hold on. So then he says on page 11, I translate Nachri as a Goy / Akum, and a Ger in your gates is a Ger Tosha through personal acceptance to 7 laws of Noah. And notice our good friend, the antagonist, he says on page 11 of Laws of Ger Toshav, Katz says a Nachri is a Goy Akum, and he adds to my writing, which I didn't write that, he in parentheses, i.e. an idol worshiper. I didn't write that. I did not write i.e. an idol worshiper, because Talmudically it's lav dafka, i.e. an idol worshiper. But in the Bible itself, a Nachri is implied to be an idol worshiper, and a Ger, not a Ger Toshav, but a Ger is someone who doesn't serve idols. A convert would be a Ger who only identifies through the third holy house, the holy house of the children of Israel, for the sake of marrying and having a Jewish child, which is a rabbinic construct in terms of Ger Tzedek, Ger Toshav. Pre-Talmud Bavli, did you have distinctions of Ger Toshav and Ger Tzedek? We don't know what the Talmud would have looked like pre-Babylon. The Torah itself says Ger. Mastama, there would have been a convert and non-convert, And we know what the laws were concerning the Ger Toshav back then in terms of their non-idolatrous ways. A convert ostensibly would be somebody who has absolute certification of not serving idols. But in a time of Beis Hamikdash, even the Ger Toshav was certified to not serve idols. So if they wanted to go a step further of carefulness, just like a Noahide who was not careful is called a Ben Noach, one who is careful in the seven is called a Ger Toshav Chasidus Moshe Olam, and that comes with Kabbalah, much like Jacques took on the Temple Mount. Okay, so why am I bringing this up? Because our antagonist friend is trying to say that whenever we teach Ger anything, you're supposed to always remind the Ger, I guess you're supposed to taunt the Ger even, which is it goes against the Torah, that there is no Ger Toshav today. So it would become absolutely impossible to articulate anything to these people because you would have to constantly remind yourself after everything you say. Is that logical or practical, one or two? So when we teach on location in context of what the Torah says, you will by definition leave out other things. That's called a mute. You cannot always bring in everything. So if I'm speaking in context of a Nachri in one scenario, let's say biblically, and then the Nachri Talmudically, but as an idolater, and then Nachri Talmudically synonymous with Goy or Akum, and then we want to differentiate between Akum, idolater, literally, and Akum, the generic term for Goy, and the generic term for Nachri. You cannot say the whole Torah on one foot every single time. No one ever does that. In fact, the Ger Sugya is difficult to learn because it's hard to learn for that reason. For example, there's a Kesef Mishnah, which is Yosef Karo's commentary on the Rambam, when talking about wine in the vicinity of a Ger Toshav, or a non-idolater. In his commentary, he calls that Ger Toshav a Ger Toshav Gamor. That is extremely confusing because generally the term Ger Toshav Gamor is the term used for a biblical level Ger Toshav that doesn't exist today. Anybody learning that Kesef Mishnah will come to think that he's talking about a biblical level Ger Toshav. Then you would say, how would we ever understand who it's talking about if the Torah is confusing like that? And the answer is because you're supposed to have a brain and seichel, and you should know through that context of the wine, which is only a rabbinic level of prohibition, contextually, it cannot possibly mean the biblical level Ger Toshav. Therefore, what he's saying is it's got to be a real Ger Toshav as opposed to some Ishmaelite without Kabbalah, type 1. Because an Ishmaelite is a level of Ger Toshav Akum, which means in the Heter Machibra for the state of Israel, they can be used on the lowest common denominator as a Ger Toshav because their religion believes in one God and not idolatry. That is not a real Ger Toshav. A proper Noahide with Kabbalah, let's say like Jacques, would be a real Ger Toshav. Then you would say, but I'm supposed to say a real Ger Toshav, but there's no Ger Toshav today. Well, then you're just confusing more. Jacques knows that on one hand, he's a real Ger Toshav, and on the other hand, he's not a real Ger Toshav. And then you will say, but that's a contradiction. Jacques, is that a contradiction? If I say after the Temple Mount, you're a real Ger Toshav, and at the same time you say, but there's no Ger Toshav today, do I have to say and remind you there's no Ger Toshav today? And I can't say that you're like a Ger Toshav because that would be a different context altogether. There are times to say real Ger Toshav. There are times to say there is no real Ger Toshav. There are times to say like a Ger Toshav. And you have to know those times. When one learns the mystical Kabbalah, the Ben Ish Chai says in his Hakdama to his Kabbalistic Sfarim. The scholar of Kabbalah will run into contradictions in the Arizal. It's inevitable. And when you find those contradictions, you will either go off the derech and make conclusions that are false, or you will know how to make the right conclusions. And a scholar of Kabbalah knows where to look, how to learn to find the right context. The Ger Toshav scholar / student knows where to go to find the resolution of an apparent contradiction. Every day that I learn Ger Toshav, I find contradictions, because that's how Ger Toshav is learned. And every day there is a resolution to the contradiction. Class tonight was going to be about not withholding the wages given to a laborer. And one of the characters not to withhold wages to was a Ger Toshav. Somebody brought that to my attention. I was going to focus class on it tonight. We might get to it. We might not. And the Rambam quotes the Mishnah from Bava Metzia 111a by saying Ger Toshav. The Minchas Chinuch, I guess I'm going to include it now. What can I do? The Minchas Chinuch and Sefer Chinuch, the books that talk about the mitzvahs and their commentary, quotes this Rambam and says a Ger Toshav, which is a Ben Noach, as the Rambam states. Then the commentaries say, but the Rambam never mentioned this Ben Noach. Then they say, nobody else even mentioned Ger Toshav because there's no Ger Toshav today. But the Rambam, the big source of there is no Ger Toshav today, didn't say that there's no Ger Toshav today. Jacques, are you confused? What do you guys think? Am I confused? Now, right now, according to our antagonist, I am misunderstanding, type 1. I am deceiving you and myself, type 1. And I am deceiving, I'm confused, and I'm misunderstanding. One or two. Let's go. Hello. Because the Rambam says Ger Toshav. 1 or 2. Hello. Are you with me? Hello. Are you guys alive? Are there pulses here? Okay, good. The Rambam says Ger Toshav, but he doesn't say there's no Ger Toshav today. And according to our antagonist, we should have said, the Rambam should have said, and there's no Ger Toshav today, but he didn't. And some people want to take the liberty to tell him that, because you might make the mistake, but I thought there was no Ger Toshav today. And then they would say, is it mandatory to go out and find a Ger Toshav? No, there's no Ger Toshav today. But then when you look in the commentaries, you look in the Rambam's commentary of the Taryag Mitzvahs, he mentions a goy also. You cannot withhold his labor. And then ostensibly that goy is not an idolatrous goy. It's a non-Jew. And then even for the sake of peace, even if it's an idolatrous non-Jew, we include him. And that's why the Rambam wrote Ger Toshav. In one place he was being specific. In another place he was being general. And there's not so much as a contradiction in the Rambam, but he's bringing you the source, as Russell would say, as it's written in the Torah. And then the common vernacular, the common halacha is we don't withhold wages from anybody. 1 or 2. Are you with me? Hello. 1 or 2. Everybody. 1, 2. There you go. So the person that brought that to my attention asked me if I could look into it. And when I first looked into it, if I didn't understand Ger Toshav, would you expect me to say, man, this is really contradicting? Everyone type 1. Everyone type 1. But since I know the sugya, and I knew where to look and how to look, it was not a contradiction. But like Jake Fry in his Rubik's Cube, I had to go through the moves and solve the white cross, so to speak, on the Rubik's Cube, and figure out how to unravel the contradiction. Type 1. Once I unraveled it, it was very simple. That's called knowing the sugya. That's not called a contradiction. Now, the big question is, am I allowed to teach you people that sugya? There is this thing called not withholding wages, and the non-Jew or a ger toshav is included and do not withhold wages from them. Is that something that might interest you? One or two? Okay, so it interests you. Am I wrong for teaching it to you? One or two? One or two. Okay, not wrong. Then we say, are you confused when I teach it that you're going to walk away and say, so I guess there really is a ger toshav biblical level today. As long as I don't say after every sentence, remember guys, there is no ger toshav today. All right, type 1. So the problem and the paranoia and the antagonism is not true. It is not in the best interest of being productive in teaching the Torah to non-Jews in a permitted way of what is permitted to non-Jews and what is relevant and interesting to non-Jews. With that said, when you find the contradictions in ger toshav, and they are plenty, they are very easy to solve. It's called, you keep looking up the sources, run through the sugya until it unravels itself, and everything goes back in order. You start to realize how the Rambam meant ger toshav there, how he meant goy over there. Did he mean goy stam, idolater over there? Did he not mean that? And anybody with a brain and seichel can figure out how to put the puzzle together. Very simple. Is there an easy way to write it without the contradiction? I don't think so. Some things in life are just with the contradiction. That's like saying, give me a math problem to work out, but I don't want to see you show your work. And calculators are illegal. Then how am I supposed to do the math problem? Then you say, well, math is supposed to be easy. You're supposed to just know the answer. But math is not easy, and it takes figuring it out and manipulation of the problem through the quadratic equation, etc., and then you provide an answer. Understanding Torah is very similar to math. It comes in a complicated equation, and you need to run the quadratic equation to figure it out, and then you write down the answer. These people have this notion that Torah is supposed to be so easy that you don't have to figure anything out. Is there anything in life that's easy that doesn't need figured out? Honestly, is there anything that you've ever seen as a mature adult that you can step back and say, that was easy. Man, I didn't even need to figure that out. Can you name one thing like that? Anyone? Name one thing that you didn't have to think about at all. And then you say, but the rabbis were great men, and they worked it all out for us. So we don't have to think at all. We just read it like a nursery rhyme. But, even a nursery rhyme, I read my kids' books. Do you guys ever read your kids' nursery rhymes when they're small? Everybody, 1, 2, 2, 1. I don't know about you, but you got to figure out those nursery rhymes. You guys ever had that experience? Not every nursery rhyme is simple. Did you ever realize that? It's more complicated as an adult to figure it out than when you're younger. You just accept it. It's like the people on Facebook post their tests from their kids. Even my kids, they have me help them with their homework. Some of those questions are written so poorly, I have no idea what they're talking about. I have to use Talmudics to understand a second grader's question in math. Because that's how it is. Everything in this world needs thought out. There is nothing that is so simple that you can just roll out of bed and not think. That's why God gave you a brain. Not because it's interesting to use or fun to use or special to use. You have to use your brain. The more successful you want to be in life is the more you get accustomed to using your brain. Torah is like the king of using your brain. Now, in Torah, let's say there's the help of heaven. To use your brain, God will help you move your brain juices around to think. That's why it's a divine experience. But the main antagonist question that I find is when they say, Rabbi Katz, if you're right, then why would the Chazal make, or the Rambam even, make Torah so hard? And I say, well, the Rambam didn't make it hard. He was copying and pasting from Chazal, and the Chazal made it hard. And then you say, why is the Talmud so hard? I don't know. Because language is hard. And the Talmud is composed of language. And language is a very spiritual thing. It's the essence of Greek wisdom, the logos. Right? And so the spoken word is very holy in Judaism. And the mastery of the oral Torah is understanding the complexity of Iker terms and words, which we call communication. In the study of Torah, it's the study of Torah. No one said the Talmud was easy and there were simple definitions and not multiple definitions. So the rabbis, the Rishonim, use those definitions in their multiple uses of context. And then in the halacha, there are many ways to understand. And the Chafetz Chaim, in his Hakdama to the Mishnah Brura, says, if you think you can open the Shulchan Aruch and unlearn halacha, you will have no idea what you're looking at, and you will eventually stop learning the Shulchan Aruch. That no halacha can be understood unless you've looked back into Chazal and Poskim through the Shulchan Aruch and the late writings of the Achronim, meaning the entire Masorah of Torah to follow the thread all the way through. In other words, it's very complicated to learn Torah, to learn it in the original. Now, to hear a class, that's one level, right? To hear it and chop it and move on. But to dig it out for yourself is very difficult. These people that stand against what is written in laws of Ger Toshav are trying to say that the Torah is not that hard, it's not complicated, it should not be with contradictions, it should not be confusing, and if it is, then you're deceiving us. Do you realize that? That's fantastic. You realize what I just said? How amazing is that? If you say something from Torah that's confusing or contradicting, that means you are deceiving us. Can you think of anything but further from the truth? Torah, by definition, is filled with contradictions. By definition, it is confusing until you work out those contradictions. When you work out those contradictions, you need not label each conclusion so as to not trample on other or arouse other contradictions. At some point, you have to stand awake and aware in the sugya, where all is revealed, and you don't put little band-aids to remember not to contradict. Meaning, when I learn the Kesef Mishnah of the Rambam, I will not suddenly say, oh, I thought the Kesef Mishnah was saying Ger Toshav Gamor is a full-level Ger Toshav. No, once we establish that there is such a thing as Ger Toshav Gamor in the Kesef Mishnah that is not the biblical level, I need not reiterate that every single time. But in passing, when I teach, I may choose to interject when I feel appropriate. And remember, it is not the same as the biblical level Ger Toshav. Is there any one perfect way to give over this high-level Torah? No. So I have my way. And those that want the power to say want to say it their way. And they're more than welcome to say it their way. But they want to say that if you don't say it like us, then you are being deceptive and wrong and this and that. To which I say, There is not any one way to say it. They don't want to learn it because it is too difficult and they are afraid of contradictions, which means they are afraid of the wisdom of the Torah. And whatever other reason is, I don't know, not them. But according to the problem as presented, I'm not saying after every time I mention the word ger, and remember there's no ger toshav today. Because the listener is expected to have a brain and some intelligence. Type 1. And this is what I wrote about on Facebook. When I started writing type 1, hello, you guys there? Hello. Hello, hello, hello. 1, 2, 2, 2, 1, 1, 1, 1, hello, hello. When I started writing articles for Noahide Nations in 2011, and I came on to Ger, I started finding midrashim that God loves Gerim, and they were not only converts. And I would sign off every article, and you can see it in the book Sul Mazel and a lot of the articles. Blah, 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 and God loves Gerim, and so should you. Blah, blah, blah. And I would share, this is when I first started writing these articles, and I would share with Chaim, and he would get very upset, and he would say, so what, God doesn't love the Jewish people? And I would say, Chaim, it is obvious that God loves the Jewish people. We don't need to say after every positive thing about the non-Jew, and by the way, God loves the Jewish people more, or God still loves the Jewish people. The big chiddush is that these Noahide conversion guys never found a reason to say something positive about a non-Jew, or that God would have something positive about a non-Jew. That's why you have to convert, because then we can talk positive about you. Then they want to say, but the Noahides are special people too, in a very condescending way. But what I found is that somebody that God speaks about in the Torah who has left idolatry is beloved by God, and God loves that person. And I would write these articles, and again, the Jewish people that I would show the articles to, my close friends, would get upset and say, what, God doesn't love us? And then they got over, and I'll explain. Yeah, God loves us. Our love with God doesn't just go away. And the Lubavitcher Rebbe says very clearly that the Torah of Mashiach is when we teach Torah to the non-Jew, it automatically puts the Jew in the rule of light to nations, and the non-Jew as receiving that priestly light, and that's the Torah of Mashiach that comes out of that relationship through the crown of Torah and the crown of the priesthood. That's also written about in Laws of Ger Toshav. And so when that message got clear to Chaim, that's what paved the path to write the world of the Ger, was figuring out and taking down many centuries of ill will between Jews and non-Jews, from Christianity and Judaism, to start to learn and discover the Torah vernacular of God's love for the non-Jew who has come back to God and abandoned idolatry, and the love of God, the love that God has for the Jew who helps the non-Jew return in the ways of God. That became the basis of the Sol Mazel book and the world of the Ger. Laws of Ger Toshav became the halachic realities brought down by the rabbis that describe the Ger Sugya. There is no final level where Ger just gets simple, like a book that you would call Ger Toshav Brura. Now, I will endeavor to write that book, and I can't promise it'll ever get done, but I will continue to clarify this sugya and listening to Neanderthal problems of people like Moshe Shulman and the Noahide world in general, because ultimately it is my responsibility to try my best to make this as clear as possible. But I am also a realist, and I know that the oral Torah is this way. It is difficult. It's like Bigfoot, it is just blurry. Is there a magical conclusion to define Ger Toshav and Ger Tzedek? No. But can we always strive to refine it and make it a little clearer? Yes. Will the Noahides always have a problem with it nonetheless? Yes. Will people like Chaim get the message and realize that God loves both camps and that it's possible to speak positively about both camps? Yeah. Chaim chose to call the world of the Ger with the word Ger because he wanted them to struggle with getting over the Talmudic definition and get back to the biblical definition just as a shift of consciousness, where everybody thinks Ger is either convert or Ger Toshav. They don't even think it's Ger Toshav. They think it's convert. Then when you argue for 6 years, they can see that maybe it means Ger Toshav. Then when you get into the Chumash, you realize it's a whole different world. It's the opposite of a Nachri. And then the Chumash never spoke about Toshav or Tzedek. That's called Chaim. And now Chaim is the biggest Ger advocate that is on face of planet Earth because he got it. And a lot of my Jewish friends got it. That when I wrote that God loves the Ger, they stopped saying, what about us? They accepted their place as a light to nations. And that's what we're asking the Noahide rabbis to do, to please grow up. And when we speak positively about the non-Jew, we don't have to feel like we're left out. And instead of constantly reminding the non-Jew, you're not real, you don't exist today, there's no Ger Toshav today, really you should convert. Ger means convert. You don't have to give these little tail end expressions. You just need to teach the truth and say the Torah as it says it. Any true believer from the nations is a believer in how the Torah is written. It's a natural relationship. These are not Christians trying to penetrate your inner sanctum. We have to trust the words of the sages, trust the words of the Torah. When somebody presents themselves as kosher to learn the Torah that is allowed for them, we'll placate and throw in that little allowed for them. All right, sometimes it is good to throw it in just for the sake of the critics. But for the sake of the people, you wouldn't have to say that. The Ger, as we call it, knows what is allowed for them and what isn't, or what is appropriate and what isn't. Because they're not interested in what's not appropriate. They're not interested in what is not appropriate. When I take my daughter to buy clothes, I don't have to hide from her the boys section. She's not interested in wearing Reuben's clothes. I don't have to put a blindfold over her. Oh, we're going to the boys section. Don't look at those pants. They're for boys. I don't have to do that. She's a girl. She doesn't want to look like a boy. The Ger doesn't want to be Jewish. That's why they're not converted. They want to be Ger. They want to do what's appropriate for Ger. They want to be what's appropriate for Ger. They want to think what's appropriate for Ger. They're very comfortable with Ger. They have an identity as Ger. It's the Jew who needs to hear these little reinforcements. And it's not the scholar Jew. The Talmud Chacham doesn't need those little reinforcements either. It's the, what do you call it? The, what's the word? What's the word for lack of confidence? The, what's that word called? It's like lack of confidence. What's that called? Anybody? Hello? The lack of confidence. What's that called? What's that word, Jacques? What's that called? When you're not confident in yourself. What's that called? Hello, Justin, John. What's that called? No, not timid. No, not low self-esteem. Oh man, this term always escapes me. What's that called when you don't have strong confidence? Insecure. Thank you. It's people who are insecure, and for whatever reason, people who are insecure are caught in the crossfires of this, and they need not project their insecurities on a Torah that is designed to be very secure. A contradiction does not need to breed insecurity. It needs to breed courage to go through the sugya and understand and grow beyond the contradiction. Just like it says in Divrei Kabbalah, just like it says by the Chafetz Chaim when concerning the Shulchan Aruch and Halacha, you got to dig deeper and learn the sugya, do the hard work out the problem, and you'll realize there is no contradiction. Torah is one. The sages did write it in a very challenging way, but that's the nature of language. Learning Torah is not simple. We learn the Torah in the original. The original, if you want to speak only in the original, not in English, then there's no contradiction in terms of how we communicate, but everybody understands the original, so we rely on English. And that's what I have to say for today. All right, so the moral of the story is everyone should grow up and stop being insecure and stop being petty about who gets to say. Moshe Shulman, the antagonist, even admits in the blog there is, though, the opinion that the Noahides today are like Ger Toshav. No one is saying that there's a Ger Toshav status today. No, Moshe Shulman, Ger doesn't mean convert. Ger Tzedek doesn't mean convert either. There's more definitions of Ger and Ger Tzedek than convert. For example, Ger can mean a stranger. A Ger Tzedek can be an Eved Kanani. And the cherry on top, no, Pshat and Pshuto are not the same thing. Go ask your rabbi what Lefi Pshuto means. It does not mean the Pshat. It means it means the textual truth, or what the oral Torah says is true for the superimposed on the Chumash. As we learn in Sfat, in Chaim's house, when Abraham called at the Eshel, and then to the God of the universe, the Pshat is that Abraham called out to God of the universe. Isn't that obvious? Is that Pshat? One. Hello. The Talmud in Sota wants to say, hey, what about the Eshel? What's up with that Eshel? And then they resolve themselves and say, it was the Eshel, which was an inn. And the people that came to Abraham's tent learned how to call out in the name of God. That is not the Pshat. That is the Pshat in the Talmud, according to what is the Eshel. The Talmud is asking a completely different thing. To superimpose that in Rashi onto the Chumash is called Lefi Pshuto. The Pshat doesn't change that Abraham called out to God. Please know the difference between very simple grammar to understand that the words are different. Pshuto is an Iker term. Rashi comes to explain Lefi Pshuto. He's telling you what other textual truth says in relationship to what is written in the Chumash. That does not mean it is the Pshat. It is the Pshuto, meaning it is a truth and not the truth. The Pshat is the truth. The truth is Abraham called out to God. That is what he did. Yesher Koyach. See you for the next class this week. Stay tuned for those updates. And that will be all for tonight. Yesher Koyach. Good to see you back. And be well.